to the road to growth, success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, you Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Neil Shah. He is the CEO of ThinkNimble, or co-founder. I mean, I looked on the website. It's co-founder and CEO.
Both.
Is it?
Both. You can just call me Neil. That works.
Okay, perfect. Fair enough. So, if you're thinking about starting a startup, or you have a startup right now, this is like the one-stop shop for a startup. If you look at Neil's bio, it seems like every aspect of it has had some kind of affiliation with the startup. Is that kind of correct to assess?
That's right. Yeah. So our whole ethos at ThinkNimble, we are a software development agency. We work with early stage companies, and our whole ethos is that we're entrepreneurs serving entrepreneurs. And so we're a full service agency. We do traditional software development. We have in-house development. We've got UI, UX, sort of all the things you need to build your app. But our mentality is that you're not really building an app, you're building a business, right? And so an app is just code, right? But there's this layer around the app that is helping your company get off the ground, testing with users, raising funding, figuring out how you build a team around what you're doing. And so, it's a mantra among our team. We don't launch apps, we launch businesses. And that's sort of the mentality that we have going into this.
Well, and if you go to their website, I was doing a little research and went to their website looking at basically the profile pictures. And I think you have a Boba Fett. Someone dressed up as Boba Fett or something like that, or
I wouldn't doubt it. I think that might be our default image. So that person didn't get me their image, so I'll figure out.
Oh, is that what it was?
Right.
Okay.
But there's a good chance. Boba Fett was the first entrepreneur. That's what we always say.
Oh, is that, there we go. Yeah, no, it definitely seems just from the website that it'd be a fun company to be associated with.
And I'll say, so the reason we started this originally, so many of us who are working here, like I said, are former entrepreneurs. And so the founders of this company, me, Marcy, and William, all ran a startup called Aspire from 2013 to 2017 when we sold it to a big accounting firm called Marcum. And it was a venture-backed HR tech company. We provided non-traditional and traditional perks and benefits, worked with big brands like Uber, Geico, Northwestern Mutual, did the whole sort of build the beta program, test it with a bunch of users, raise rounds of funding, and then go through the sales process. And so, when we were thinking about what to do next, we tried angel investment. We were pretty terrible at it, just being frank. And so, but we had a team of people, product managers, engineers, people who really loved getting the first stages of companies off of the ground. So we decided this was our way of staying involved in the startup ecosystem. We started this as a lifestyle business. Like the goal was to work with a few early stage companies, act as their CTO plus development team, sort of support from the sidelines. But I think what we found is that there's so many early stage support development services that are development only. It's really easy to outsource an app. It's really easy to find someone who can build JavaScript, but it's hard to find someone who is a developer and a coder who deeply understands software architecture, who's also seen the journey of a tech company. So when we went out there, we just found no end of business. We found so many people who were really excited about finding human developers, like people who can both speak people and then also speak code. And so it ended up being really great. It is the most fun job I've ever had. Like all day long, we're just working with startups, launching businesses. Our team internally, many of them are starting businesses like on the side with us, which we really encourage. And so, our head of sales has a business on the side. But many of our developers are also working on startups themselves. And it's just like this like loose confederation of entrepreneurs that are all working together to kind of help launch and support and grow other businesses. We have an angel firm that we're starting in January. We do these things called office hours where our developers volunteer to support early stage entrepreneurs. We do a ton of events in our DC office that are just sort of like similar to this, like interviewing and talking to entrepreneurs. So it's just like, if you like entrepreneurship, ThinkNimble is like a really great place to work.
Are any of those events, and I doubt they would be, are any of them like streamlined or anything like that, or are they all in person, or how does that work?
We do both. I mean, obviously with the pandemic, I think everything moved online, but we do some streaming events. I can send you some information afterwards if you'd like.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll add it to the show notes. Now, okay, I got to rewind a little bit. You talked about you got into angel investing, but it didn't go well. Can you walk us through what happened there?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like this is like It's interesting. I think this is like sort of the mantra across the angel investment industry right now. So I'm part of a group called K Street Capital. It's an angel investment group here in DC. And I'm also kind of loosely, although I'm not super active, I'm loosely involved in this group called K Street Capital here in DC. And they're both traditional angel groups. They're sort of individual investors who get together, find a bunch of early stage companies who come and pitch, and then individual investors make their own decisions on what to invest. And there's like a minimum of what you have to invest as being part of this. So they're not they're industry agnostic. They're not super structured in terms of the way that they find and procure folks, but you get this sort of exposure to a ton of different entrepreneurial ventures. I, thought that was something I would be interested in. I find I'm just like a super optimist. I get really excited about everything, and I tend to hear an idea, get really supportive of the entrepreneur, and then want to invest with like very little sort of criteria or hypothesis definition or sort of structured thought involved around it. So I realized that wasn't my way of doing it. I think across the board right now, angel investment is sort of shifting to this idea of owner operators or sort of venture studios. And it's something that I'm really interested in personally. I think that it's very easy to be casually involved in a series of startups as an angel investor. But for someone who was a founder themselves or someone who's interested in sort of like the details of how to start a startup, it wasn't the right pathway for me. So I really like this idea of sort of being deeply involved with startups, like what we're doing at ThinkNimble, where we can kind of like coach, guide, help invest in, and then also support and see them launch. So I think that's probably it for me.
Well, yeah, I had another angel investor on here before, and they talked about almost, I think it was like 1,000 companies, and out of 1,000, they probably go with 5.
Yeah,
it's like something really low. Like, so
you
someone who's an optimist like yourself, that'd probably be very difficult to hold back for 995 other opportunities.
Yeah, and there are some people who are very good at it. Like, I think, we sort of approach our startups at ThinkNimble with this idea that, when you build a business, you're really building an experiment. And so the best investment pitches, I think, like what we hear at K Street or, like what we hear at ThinkNimble, sometimes people come with like a 10-slide pitch deck, the traditional sort of investor pitch deck, which is like, this is the problem, this is the solution, this is the competitive slide, here's my list of features, boom, that's my hockey stick, right? It's sort of like when you apply for a job and every resume is exactly the same and you look through them and they're like completely undifferentiated. I feel like a lot of startups sort of trend towards the mean. Our thought instead is that every business is an experiment, and the thing that makes an experimental work is effective experimental design, right? And that's like a really hard thing to grasp, especially for entrepreneurs who are sort of all over the place, like me, and like a little bit crazy, right? You're like, I'm going to experiment, I'm going to try wild things. But the more you can control and direct that experiment towards a series of hypotheses, the more effective your experiment will be. And so, we coach our startups to sort of think in this way. Over the next year, in order for my business to work, these 10 things must be true, right? I need to show a willingness to pay. I need to show that people are willing to spend X amount. I need to show I can get my costs down to this amount. I need to show that this can replicate across different cities. It's not just in DC. Boom, 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 right? Mm-hmm. A good pitch says, I know that these 5 things are true. I've done research. I've looked at people. I've tested things out. I don't know that these 5 things are true. So Mr. and Mrs. Investor, when you fund my company, you're not funding the company. You're funding this next year of experiments where I'm going to systematically try and prove that each 5 of these things that I don't know are true. And then if that works, you and I both agreed right now that if these 10 things are true, then this business will work. So let me prove that to you, right? And I think that's like a more honest and like partnership oriented investment strategy because it aligns both parties towards what they know and what they don't know, right? And it allows you as a CEO or an entrepreneur to sort of have this like framework of prioritization, right? You can say that like these 5 things must be true for this business to work. So that is my laser focus right now. So I really love that idea. Like if you can think in that way systematically, then you become a good angel investor, I think.
How do you, because looking from the outside in, right? It's easy to be systematic, right? Yet when you're the actual startup or the entrepreneur, right? Sometimes you get your emotions tied into it. And so it's not actually the systematic process of the hypotheses, right? But you start going systematic, you start going, oh, but this, I do. How do you, do you see red flags? When someone's too emotionally involved in their company, is it kind of like you have to step back, or how does that play a factor in for someone looking from the outside looking in?
Yeah, I think I don't want to discount the fact that I think for a lot of angel investors, I think, and again, I'm speaking as like a poor angel investor, right? But as a lot of angel investors, I think I think it is very true that the entrepreneur themselves is like 75% of what makes the business work, right?
Yeah.
There is a reality, particularly the further you get into the early stage path. At the very beginning, you're finding product market fit. You are supposed to pivot. The person is the person you're betting on. But I do think as you get, past the seed stage into the A stage, right, and you're starting to look for like real, true growth instead of just like market validation and product market fit, that's where sort of like market trends become really important. And I think as an entrepreneur, you have to think about both, right? You have to be a charismatic leader who can lead a team, who can grow an organization, who can find customers, figure out what it is that makes them tick, have a ton of empathy for a market, all of that, right? But then you also do have to approach these very systematically. I think that a lot of the entrepreneurial training programs that people go through, like all the boot camps, a lot of the early stage angel investment stuff, TechStars, Y Combinator, they focus, in something that's like fairly balanced. Let's say 75%, 25%, 75% the entrepreneur, 25% the market, and sort of figuring out like the trends and everything. I think a lot of people overemphasize the entrepreneur and they downplay sort of the importance of applying structured thought to a market and evaluation and all that. It's pretty common when we talk to early stage entrepreneurs and you ask them what their valuation is, they say, $4 million, $3 million, whatever it is, right? They sort of they arbitrarily sort of pick a number. And I think those are red flags for a lot of angel investors, where the more, maybe not a red flag, right? But it's like the more systematic an entrepreneur can be at the very beginning, the more you can kind of trust that they'll be able to carry that thought pattern through as the organization gets bigger and bigger, and they need to rely on that style of thinking. So I don't think that they're like it. The lucky thing, and this is something that we say a lot too, is that these aren't like inherent personality traits, right? They are frameworks and they are like things that you can learn. And so because of that, right, the entrepreneur can spend time and sort of think, hey, let me read this book. Let me learn a little bit about the lean startup, right? Let me learn a little bit about how to train a tech team. Let me learn a little bit about this market, right? And it's good because like as an entrepreneur, you're using limited resources to make an outsized return. And there are tons of resources out there to be able to learn and train yourself on these sorts of things.
Makes sense. I mean, now talking about a young Neil, did you have like an entrepreneur mindset? Who was young Neil?
Oh, well, I'll tell you half of that story. The other half we probably could leave off the air. But I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think that my father, actually, my parents are immigrants from India. They came over. My mom became a dentist while she was here, and my dad helped to run her dental office. And while he was there, my dad has always been just sort of like a perpetual entrepreneur, right? Like every year he would like set up the basement with a random electronic hobby project that he was working on, or he'd be exploring some sort of business. And he was an engineer, so he's like a tinkerer by nature. He worked for GM. But when I was in middle school, my father started an LED sign business. It was a colleague of his from GM. He purchased the company from him as part of leaving GM. And he worked in it. And it was a small company. They bought like LED signage and light bulbs and sort of displays and stuff. And they set them up in businesses. They did a lot of like small businesses and that sort of work. So every day after high school, in middle school, I would go and I would sit and I'd watch him do his work. And for me, I don't know, it was so nice. Like my dad always came to all of my, my soccer practices and all of my like band practices and all that stuff, because he had the freedom and flexibility that an entrepreneur can. But I also saw that he was just really fulfilled. Like every day, all day, he was thinking about and growing this thing. And it's not for everyone, but my dad and I are very similar. And so I sort of knew I wanted to go into that. When I was in college, I started a nonprofit called, at the time it was called Compass Partners. Now it's called Social Impact 360, when I was younger. And our premise was actually pretty similar, I think, to this podcast. I wanted to study entrepreneurship because that was something that I was really personally interested in. But at the time, I went to Georgetown. At the time, Georgetown didn't have an entrepreneurship education program. They actually just recently started it. But not recently. They started it right when I left, and they've been growing it. So I didn't have that. And I was like, what would an entrepreneur do? An entrepreneur would build their own entrepreneurship education program, right? And so we put together this list of probably about 200 entrepreneurs in the DC area. And we reached out to all of them and we said, hey, we want to learn about entrepreneurship. We want to be entrepreneurs ourselves. What's the one thing you wished you would have known when you were in college to better prepare yourselves to be an entrepreneur? And we took this whole list and it was all over the place. Like some people would say like taxes or something like boring, right? And some people would say like, I really wished I learned how to control my emotions, right? So I could be a little bit more disciplined about my investment strategy. So we took all of these things together and we put together this little curriculum. And we started putting just like a random group of 20 or so people through it. And every week we'd invite the entrepreneur who talked about the topic to come back and discuss that thing. It was a blast. It was so much fun. I did not pay attention in school, but I paid attention a lot to that thing. And so eventually that became a nonprofit. We got funding from the Prudential Foundation and the Kenneth Cole Foundation, who helped us kind of turn it into a structured organization. So right upon leaving school, I had this nonprofit entrepreneurship venture that I was able to work on. And I served as the executive director there for the first year after graduating. And after that, I was hooked. Like I was never not going to be an entrepreneur after that point. And I find like it's for a lot of people, it is that one-way journey. Like once you taste it, it's really hard to go back. But so for me, that was it. I think, for some people it's a decision point, right? For me, I just always knew that that's what I wanted to go into.
Was there ever a moment where, the struggle was hard, or you kind of second guessed, hey, I want that steady paycheck or anything like that?
Like every Tuesday. Since then, it's definitely like it's a very difficult path, and it is not for everyone. My wife and I are actually both entrepreneurs, which is an incredibly risky decision that we made. But we, both of us, like very often we're like, you know what, it would be so nice to just sort of like clock in and clock out and have that sort of experience. I do find that like the difference in jobs, especially now as the world is sort of changing and becoming a little bit more, flat, all organizations are becoming smaller and teams are becoming smaller and more collaborative and more democratic. I think that like the difference isn't really between entrepreneurship and not entrepreneurship. And when I say that, I mean like starting your own business and not starting your own business. It's between like doing cool and innovative things and not doing cool and innovative things. And like, there are many people who start startups and they end up being, sort of almost the same as like having a job. You're sort of like, you're beholden to your investors, you're beholden to your clients, you kind of like clock in, clock out. You don't find a lot of joy or passion in your entrepreneurial venture. You're doing it for the money, right? And there's a lot of people in sort of structured 9-to-5 jobs who, work for a venture studio, and they get the experience of sort of launching and growing businesses, even though they happen to have a paycheck and health insurance and like a boss and all that stuff, right? So I think that line is different. So I think at some point in my life, I could find myself not being an entrepreneur, right? And going to work for an organization that is a entrepreneurial-ish organization. But the barometer for me do I get the same feeling that I get from doing what I do right now in that sort of structured business? But yeah, a structured paycheck would be really nice. I would be in favor of that.
What do you think you get out of this? I mean, seeing the startups, being part of these kind of affiliations. I mean, what do you feel you get out of it besides the monetary, of course?
For me, I mean, so our tagline on our website, if you go, it's ThinkNimble.com, you can see we say that we like to work with companies that we admire. And it tends to be sort of socially focused organizations or early stage startups that are sort of like that line we were saying, doing really cool and inspiring things. Many of them are in ed tech, many of them are in health tech, many of them are sort of in new and emerging technologies, a lot of like machine learning. We did this chatbot education technology product for a while. And for me, it's just very inspiring. Like, I think I'm drawn to the startup world because it's sort of like the underdog story played out over and over and over again. I love the idea that early stage entrepreneurs have limited resources around them. They're up against these titans of industries, these old, stodgy, massive corporations, and they have to figure out a way to make it work, right? And it's always so inspiring when you see those people in the face of hard odds still come up with plans and ideas and strategies. And I think it's like the type of person I strive to be. And so being surrounded by people who do that day in and day out, it just inspires me to be a better person. So I really like that. I personally, I think my family is immigrants, and I like that. I think America is sort of built around that idea of sort of like, that sort of like dynamic innovation. And I think that, I've just always been drawn to that, right? I think that it's so exciting to see people sort of completely change around their lives and try different things and, hope for a better future. And again, it's just something I strive to be. So I like being surrounded by it.
How often, because I mean, you've dealt with a lot of different startups. How often do you see these startups a couple of years down the road and go, you know what, I was wrong on what I originally thought, either in a positive or a negative?
All the time. Yeah. I think that, like, and I don't think I'm nearly alone in that. I think, it's, if you go on Quora or you go on Reddit and you just type in like angel investor, like missed opportunity, there's all these stories of people who are like, this small little startup called Uber came to me and they said, I have this great idea. And I was like, you're ridiculous. There's no market trend that supports that. And then I walked away from this deal or whatever. Right. I mean, I think that like part of what an entrepreneur does, we always have to coach ourselves too, because there's oftentimes startups will come to us with a really great idea that we look at and we're like, that's super amazing. Or an idea that we're like, we're not sure that's going to work. Let's work with the startup and see if we can help figure that out. And like at the end of the day, the reason that entrepreneurship is so inspiring is because it's people who can see things that the market can't see, right? And that includes us, right? As investors and partners and, sort of startup aficionados or enthusiasts or whatever, right? Like it's really common to look at the startup and be like, hey, I sort of get where that lives. But that startup entrepreneur has spent every waking hour for the last like 2 or 3 years sort of digging into a market, trying to understand what it is that makes it tick. And there are barometers, there are sort of like things that you can see that, that sort of layer on top of that. But I tend to defer in favor of the entrepreneur, that eternal optimist that we were talking about earlier, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's a higher percentage chance that someone who is a really smart person who is thinking about it day in and day out, who at least shares the same, thought patterns that I do, is going to be right over me. And so I tend to defer generally to them. But yeah, all the time. Like we work with startups that we really believe in, and like the market just doesn't support it, or there isn't a willingness to pay, or whatever, right? And then the flip side of it, right? There are many, investment opportunities that we passed on, right? Because like we think that something isn't going to work out, and then it ends up completely taking off. But I think that's like part of the game. It is, it's you can't have deep knowledge of every single industry and every single market opportunity out there, right? And that's why I think people defer all the time to entrepreneurs, and it is what makes it exciting, but it's also sometimes a little frustrating, to your points.
If let's say we were talking in 5 years from now, where do you see yourself? Where do you see your business? Where do you see angel investing being?
Yeah, so I can sort of, let me take those in I think there might be 3 different answers. I'll start with ThinkNimble. So, ThinkNimble right now is very much a software development and design agency. But as we've been doing the work that we're doing, I think what we're finding is that a lot of early stage entrepreneurs need support, and that support takes many different forms. We often start, someone comes to us and they say, hey, can you write this product? We have a product that we tried to outsource. It didn't work. Can you take it and fix it and get us ready for a launch in 6 months? We say, great, we do that. In doing that, oftentimes the service that we provide tends to be these sorts of frameworks that we're talking about, right? Like thinking like a CTO, helping our startups structure their launches as hypotheses, sort of writing test plans about like what it is that is working or not working, not with the app, but with the business, right? And sort of thinking at that level. So the benefit to the entrepreneur oftentimes isn't necessarily what they came in to purchase from us at the very beginning. And that idea sort of extended, I think, can apply to a lot of different industries. I'm really inspired by this idea that we are creating, we have a development agency, we have a design agency. We're working on this angel investment group that we're putting together early next year. But there's no end of other support services that we could apply to the early stage entrepreneurship space. And I'm not sure if that's necessarily, again, we don't have our hypothesis, right? We're not really sure if that's what the market will necessarily bear right now. Like, is there enough startup appetite for that sort of service? But for me personally, I think it can start to emerge into something that is more akin to a venture studio, right? We find really promising ideas that we really think can work, people that we admire, ideas that need support, right? And then we have this whole host of services, both consultative, like that CEO thing that we were talking, or CTO thing that we were talking about, but then also hard skills like accounting and dev, design, DevOps, all of that stuff, right? We're very squarely in the software space right now, but I think there's a lot of these sorts of support services that can emerge. And there's a lot of agencies that we partner with that are out there that are this idea applied to different verticals. So there are very startup-friendly accounting firms that are out there, very startup-friendly law firms that are out there, right? And they all follow the same ethos, right? It's a hard skill, but in order to make that hard skill useful, you need to have that layer above it, right? The sort of like chief product officer for the design agency, right? Or the like sort of like chief financial officer for the accounting firm or whatever. And those people need to understand and sort of resonate with startups. And so anyway, I think there's an opportunity there for ThinkNimble that I'm really excited about. Other than that, we're about 35 people right now. I'm hoping to continue growing our software practice. And the way we're going to grow it is just by doing really good work. And so our goal is to continue to find early stage startups, support them, build our business on a reputation, and just continue to do excellent work with the people that we have. For me personally, I think ThinkNimble for me seems like a pillar for a lot of other things that we can be working on. A lot of the things that we're doing within ThinkNimble are things that I would choose to do individually. And so I see myself sort of like helping to grow and support this company and organization for as long as I can. I think this is like, there are some startups where people sort of build to sell, and you can sort of feel it. And that's really exciting. And then there are some organizations like this is for me, where I really think I could do this for the rest of my life. Like I love and I'm inspired by being surrounded by entrepreneurs. And so I think some combination of this plus, maybe a little bit more vacation would probably be where I see myself long-term down the road. And then your last question was about angel investment and how angel investment as a group is going to emerge. I think that like there are, the world of investment is very cyclical. Like there's this report, I can't remember the name of it, but if you look up like annual trends in investment or angel investment, you can probably find this report that gets put out every year that talks about the swing of investment between the very, very early stage of investment to sort of the structured sort of Series B plus stage of investment, right? And as the business cycle, the 10-year business cycle sort of goes back and forth, that sort of deployment of capital changes. So there are certain times where angel investment, really early stage, investment is really hot. And this is one of those times, right? I think people held on to money during the pandemic. They sort of expected that there was going to be a crash. There wasn't as much of a crash as we expected. And so there's more cash in the economy right now that can be deployed. There's a lot of early stage angel investment because of that. It's sort of part of, maybe a risky part of a portfolio, right? Where people put a small amount of percentage towards early stage startups. At certain points in time, the market starts to consolidate for a different industry or whatever. And that angel investment is not there. I think it's interesting because it is like, as an angel investor, it sort of tends to be that contraction is very much what defines the industry, right? And that can be a little bit frustrating as an investor who maybe is ready to invest at this stage, but you're at the wrong stage of the business cycle for the industry that you're excited about. So I see this emergence of venture studios right now, and it's everywhere. Like many angel groups, many venture funds are both starting angel groups, right? But then they're also starting venture studios. And the idea of a venture studio is that you have a hypothesis. You think, okay, I believe right now that travel is going to come back after the pandemic, right? I believe because of that, there's going to be a lot of international travel, and finding visas is hard. So there's this trend right now where people, I'm just making this up, right? Where millennials are going to need access to sort of better tools to be able to find details around what it takes to get a visa. Let's go out and see if we can find the best company that does that right now, that fulfills these hypotheses that we've defined. If that company does not exist and we cannot invest in them, right? Let's start it and let's incubate it and let's get it off the ground, test those hypotheses. And if it works, we will hire a CEO, we will hire a CTO, we will hire an operating team, right? And we'll have that group build that company, but we'll incubate it and we'll own a portion of it, right? It's a form of angel investment, but it's like a highly operative form of angel investment, right? Where you're working alongside the businesses that get started. And kind of coaching and guiding them. And then probably most importantly, you're leveraging sort of like de-risked resources, right? If you know that a CTO is really good at working on early stage startups, you can help deploy that person to this idea, right? And get it off the ground. So this is a total wild guess based on very little detail and just anecdotal information, right? But I see a lot of folks who are interested in angel investment, very interested in that idea, because many of them get into it because they want to be close to and surrounded by entrepreneurship. But the nature of angel investment is sort of like many small bets all across the industry, right? So personally, I'm very drawn to it. And the things that I thought would have gotten me into angel investment are what's getting me into that world right now. And I see a lot of angel investors doing the same thing. Again, not based on any data and wildly speculative, but I sort of feel like the industry might be going that way.
Well, you brought up the collaboration idea, and giving some funds, but also collaborating. It seems like, at least from people that I've had on the podcast, I've heard more people talk about that avenue for startups than just getting money. Because like you said, it kind of protects the money a little more by collaborating with these startups, and it kind of helps you out. Do you think we're going to lean more towards, like you said, like now instead of 80%, 90% of just money, just kind of giving money to a lot of different companies, but now like when you're dealing with a startup, you're going to have basically more startups going to the collaboration aspect of it, for they have better protection? Or how do you think that leaning over time? That makes sense?
And you're saying, will angel investors sort of become more collaborative in their investment strategy?
Yeah, exactly. Will that kind of be more the lean to it? And that'll be kind of like instead of the norm of just basically angel investing, just giving money, it will be kind of more the rarity in the future where it's just basically, we're just giving money. It's more about the collaboration.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think, angel investors say all the time the idea, and, when we were raising money at Aspire, the mantra was always around de-risking, right? It was like, hey, like, that's a great idea. I would feel more comfortable investing if X, Y, Z are true, right? So go out and prove those things are true so you can help de-risk my investment. That idea, I think, it's exciting, I think, for a angel investor to be able to apply their knowledge to a startup in that way. But I think it can be harmful to some degree because angel investors are typically casually involved with the businesses that they work on, but the entrepreneur is super actively involved in the startup that they're working on. So I think that the most effective forms of collaboration, and angel investors tend to be exited entrepreneurs. They tend to be people who have experience in an industry enough to be able to have cash to be able to deploy in startups, right? So they do have a form of expertise, but it's often industry experience or sort of like even investment experience is often misappropriated with entrepreneurial experience and operating experience, And so I think that, I think in all ways, I think collaboration between entrepreneurs and angel investors is a great idea, right? But I think as an angel investor, the most important thing is to hold your ego at bay and realize what it is that you're investing in. It is a inherent power dynamic when you give a startup angel investment money, right? And if you lean into that idea, right, you can really ruin the investment that you're making, right? There's this sort of like golden thing that a startup entrepreneur is giving you, and it's not a power dynamic thing. It's not like a gift. It's not like a donation or whatever. It's an equal exchange of value. An entrepreneur comes to you and they say, hey, I've got this equity that is worth X. Will you exchange that equity for cash? And it's an equal exchange of value, right? If you do that, I will take your money and I will run it within my company, right? In the same way I would in a mutual fund, right? I will run it within my early stage company and I will work all day, every day to make that company grow, right? So that your investment grows, right? And so like that idea is like, it's cool. Like you are trusting the entrepreneur with the money to be able to steward it and grow it. And I think that sort of trust and empathy is really important. So long way of saying, if you are going to go down that path as an angel investor of being way more collaborative and way more operative, I think the important thing is to sort of like, realize that the entrepreneur is putting a ton into this and has a ton of thought into it, right? So approach it with that mentality. Approach it as a partnership, right? Approach it as like a really thoughtful exchange of ideas, right? Rather than just like like you are on their board and you're dictating the growth of this company. At a certain point, the further you get down the investment path, the more you actually do the board seats and do all of that, right? And that makes more sense, right? But as an angel investor, you tend to be, providing advice and sort of like trusting the entrepreneur. And so, yeah, collaboration is always great.
Now, this might be a very, very hard question to answer, and I'll finish it off with this and give you a hard one. If someone's listening right now and they're in the early stages of starting a business, I mean, what is something that they should? I know you talked about the hypotheses, putting something together, kind of a breakdown of it. But is there any other thoughts, any other kind of things they should really think about when they're in the early stages of starting a business?
I
told you I'd give you a hard one. Right?
Yeah, I think that, I think that is a theme I think that comes up a lot as we're talking to early stage entrepreneurs is this idea that there is a ton of advice out there for sort of the first, couple of years of your entrepreneurial growth. And you can go online and you can find pitch decks, you can find, podcasts like this, right? You can find lectures, you can find all this stuff that sort of guide you down this path. But I think the disservice that we do to entrepreneurs by providing advice like this, right, is we start to like sort of make everyone in the entrepreneurial space sort of migrate towards this mean, right? That 10-slide pitch deck that I mentioned beforehand, right? Where if you were to sort of be a diligent student of the tech entrepreneurship world and kind of read everything that's out there, you would probably emerge with a pitch deck that looks extremely similar to everyone else's, right? But the reason that you got into entrepreneurship and the reason that you're doing something that you're doing right now is because you see something that no one else does. And because you see something that no one else does, you can probably approach it like no one else does, right? And you can sort of go, you can go down a path that you think is right for the industry that you're, or for the business that you're creating. And so, I don't think it's like a absolute, right, that you should do exactly what you want. Like, definitely take advice from great people, like, learn from people who have been there before. But I think that it's definitely not a pre-prescribed growth path. And I think the way that we talk about it is that, you start a product, you build an MVP, you test it with an early stage market, you put together a seed round, you grow some money, you hire a sales team, you raise an A, and eventually it leads to a sale, right? And like, that's definitely not how it works. If you talk to any entrepreneur who has gone down that path, it's a much windier and crazier path. And so I don't know why we pretend it's that simple, right? But I think we all crave simple solutions, right? We all crave sort of pathways and frameworks or whatever. And so I think we look at that and we kind of become attracted to that, especially as an early stage entrepreneur, when everything else is chaos. That idea is very comforting, right? That there is a defined, tried and true path to do it. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist, right? So rather, I think the best thing to do as an early stage entrepreneur is to find people who really align with the principles and the values that you have as a person, who have been down that path before, and invite them into the decision-making process, right? One of the best things we had at Aspire was we had this really strong advisory board, and this advisory board would sit down with us. We treated it like it was our board of directors. I met with them once a quarter, and we did an hour-long meeting. I had like a really structured sort of agenda with detailed questions. We required them to attend certain meetings throughout the year. And those were highly valuable conversations, because it wasn't like they were giving me advice. It wasn't like I was just like sort of like, having them be like a slide on my pitch deck or whatever, right? I was like, they were almost like co-operators with me on the business. And it was that sort of partnership idea that we talked about beforehand, right? Where we were all approaching it, in the same way. We were like, hey, we're trying to grow this business. We're trying to grow your investment, right? How can we think about this, in a smart way? So anyway, long story short, my advice would be like, don't do what everyone else is doing. Be a free and independent thinker in the entrepreneurial world, and find really smart people who you can surround yourself with, who can help encourage and sort of bounce that style of thought off of. And don't make a 10-slide pitch deck. It's not worth it.
Well, I appreciate you, all your insight, Neil. If someone's listening right now and they want to hear more about ThinkNimble, more about your upcoming events, what's the best way of finding more information?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, ThinkNimble.com, you can learn more about us. My email is Neil, Neil @ThinkNimble.com. I love hearing from all sorts of entrepreneurs, so please feel free to reach out. Happy to set up a call. I genuinely love doing that stuff. I would love to mention one thing that we provide that I think could be helpful to your audience. We do this program called Office Hours, where our developers, who oftentimes have been entrepreneurs beforehand, volunteer a couple of hours of their time per quarter to just work with early stage entrepreneurs. A lot of times you don't need like really high level advice, and you also don't need to pay someone to code on a project for you. You just have a deep technical question where you just want to say, hey, I'm starting this business. I'm choosing between these 3 frameworks of development, right? I've done some basic research. I just need a developer to qualify my research. Can you sit down and help me out? The way we do it is we ask that you go to our website. It's under ThinkNimble Labs. You fill out this questionnaire, and then our engineers will spend some time, do some research, and then sit down with you and answer that question. It's great training for our team, because it helps remind them that entrepreneurs are using the code that they're writing, right? But it's also really valuable, I think, for the entrepreneurs who just want a little bit of technical advice. So you can always email me, but if you want to talk to a developer, go to our Office Hours program and sign up. I think it's every Friday from 10 to 12 Eastern time, and we'd love to have you.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, I appreciate, Neil. Hopefully everyone listening got some great nuggets right there. Yes, I think there, like you said, when you first started, there's a model to the madness for startups. Yet you said it perfectly at the end. You had the idea. It's you, the person, you, the startup, you, the individual. Go your own path, build your own business. Thank you guys for listening. Please subscribe. Go find Neil, and have a great one. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Vinny.